person living with dementia may not remember the day, but they can enjoy the moment. We've called this session Bits and Bobs because there's lots of little bits and bobs that don't necessarily fit into any of our other categories. So here is a random selection of different bits and bobs. First, I'd like to tell you a little story. Lateral thinking is something that you will become very adept at through this journey you're on. We had a lady whose husband was living with dementia, and she was very quick at thinking about alternative things to do. Well, when one day she went out to the mailbox to get the mail and the door slammed behind her. So when she went back and knocked on the door, her husband wouldn't let her in. And he said, "You can't come in, my wife's not home." So instead of arguing that she was the wife, she actually said, "Well, that's fine, I'll come back later when your wife's here." She went up, walked down the road a little bit, walked back, went to her back door, where she had a spare key hidden, let herself in, changed her clothes, and then walked through the house saying, "Hi, I'm here, I'm back." And he said, "Oh, there was a strange lady came to the door, but I didn't let her in." And he was happy, she was happy, she dealt with it, and it made life much easier for both of them. So little things like that can make a big difference. And it goes back to a theme we've had through all these sessions about the not arguing. It won't make a difference, it'll increase stress levels. And I always remember this story, and I had Audrey's permission to share it. So thank you, Audrey. Another area that we've touched on before, but I think here's a little bit more, is the bathroom. Often we go into bathrooms and they're white, and the toilet's white, and the seat's white. And sometimes, this is trendy now, we have white towels. Just think about how confusing that could be for somebody living with dementia. So think about maybe a different coloured toilet seat. Many of them grew up with wooden toilet seats. Or black, the old black Bakelite toilet seat. Just have a little think. Would that maybe make going to the toilet a little bit easier? Think about colours of bath mats, or if you even have bath mats, some of them can look like a black hole on the tile and make somebody scared to go into that room. The same with coloured dark tiles can also sometimes be an issue. Somebody thinks it's a hole in the ground. Perhaps have coloured towels, so it's obvious that this is the hand towel or the bath towel. So little things like that can make a big difference when going in the toilet. Don't necessarily have all the family toothbrushes out on display. Maybe have their toothbrush and their toothpaste. Keep it simple. Just try and put yourself into their position. And if I walk into this room, how confronting is this? The other really big thing is mirrors. Now, we all look in the mirror and we all think, "Ooh, is that really me?" But for somebody living with dementia whose memories and where they think they are in the past, and they look in the mirror and see this older person, it can really frighten them. One idea is to cover the mirror somehow. You can get these little day-night little blinds that could just come down when they're in the bathroom. You could just cover it with something. You could remove it altogether. It just helps remove an element of fear for some people. And others might look in the mirror and think, "What's my dad doing here?" Because they're seeing themselves as their parent who might look like them. So it's just something to be aware of. Again, it's something that can cause quite a lot of trauma in a bathroom. Razors, if they're having trouble shaving but still want that bit of independence, think about an electric razor. You know, it's a simple thing, but it can make all the difference to the independence of the person living with dementia. It's important to remember, if you as a carer have had to take over the cooking and the meal preparation, etc., to try not to take over completely. why not ask the person into the kitchen? They might be able to scrub the potatoes or peel the potatoes, might still be able to chop some things. They just need that direction. And sometimes the companionship of doing it together, doesn't matter if nothing's perfect. How many of us are perfect cooks? But or giving them something to wash up in the sink while you're doing the main meal. There's all sorts of little options that just makes the person feel still involved, still slightly in control, but gives you a nice little bond. Stovetops can be a problem. Now, some people living with dementia can put the stove on and walk away, or put the gas on, walk away. You can get timers for those things. They're attached by your electrician, and it means they automatically, especially electric ones, will switch off automatically after so many minutes of there being no action. Also, with the stoves, maybe if they're still able to do things themselves, have a little timer so that the buzzer goes off, and that just reminds them that there's something happening in the kitchen. Or if they're using mobile phones, you could have a little alarm, and it might pop up with turn off the stove, take the shortbread out the oven, whatever the situation might be. So there's lots of little things. A couple of stories I've heard with the fridges. Somebody was getting anxious because mother was taking everything out of the freezer to get to something. In the end, they worked out that it was a certain type of ice cream they wanted out the freezer. So what they did was just put one tub of ice cream in the little fridge freezer, and it didn't matter if she'd left it out and didn't put it back. But went to the freezer, she saw what she wanted, took it out, and was happy. Whether she ate it or not was irrelevant. They put the same one back in because she never ate it. It was the art of taking the ice cream out the fridge that was the thing for her. Other people have successfully put white chalkboards, like a blackboard, on their fridge to hide the fact it's a fridge, because their particular people might be going into the fridge all the time and eating just whatever was there and not necessarily suitable for them or their diet. So a blackboard with some writing on it disguised the fact it was a fridge. There's many things that you can actually, again, look up on the internet about the space, the living space for somebody living with dementia, and there are lots of wonderful tips and hints. Other things to consider are crockery. If you've got a white table, white tablecloth, white paper napkins, white china, and maybe you're having chicken and cauliflower and white sauce, white, how does the person know what's food? So consider different coloured plates, or making sure the food's different colours to your plates. Don't crowd your table, don't have too many knives and forks and spoons and things all at once. Try and simplify everything and think about how confusing it would be for a person living with dementia. Sometimes people living with dementia like to walk a lot, and they don't like to sit to have a meal. So consider having little snacks of finger foods around the house, or even at the table, having finger foods if they've lost the ability to use cutlery, because then they're still in control of what actually they're doing. So there's lots of things you can think of, and even having little bowls of fruit or nuts or things they enjoy in spaces around their walk, wherever it is they're walking, and just help encourage them to graze and eat something, because the walking is using up a lot of energy. Everything doesn't have to be bland and mashed together and look like slop. They can still get a lot of pleasure from seeing and smelling cooking. I think the smell's very important because it evokes memories. Cook with them, bake with them. Make something that they remembered and enjoyed from younger years. It's a thing to think about is to have little night lights around the house, so that if your person gets up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, they can see where they're going. They don't have to fumble for a light switch and maybe knock it off, which could pose a hazard. It gives them that little bit of security. They know there's a light in the bathroom, they know there's a light in the hall. It just guides their way to where they're going. Sometimes a full light on can just be too much, but the little night light is often just does the trick. You can also have alarms on, be it your front, your back door, bedroom doors, that trip when somebody goes through them and lets you as the carer know that your person has left the building. And you can check up on them and, make sure that they're where they're meant to be and safe. And I know it sounds like it's invading their privacy and their right to go for a walk, etc., but you've got to consider that safety angle. And if they're just taking off without you knowing where they are, then consider an alarm. Televisions can be a really scary thing. Now, we all like to watch the news, but sometimes for people living with dementia, the news can actually be really confronting. And all these ghastly ads for funeral plans and starving children in Africa, they can actually get into somebody's mind and stick there, and it becomes a real source of anxiety and worry. So try to just monitor slightly what's happening on the television and change the subject, have the inevitable cup of tea, break the cycle if it looks like they're getting distressed. And even some of the everyday television series, it can be really disturbing because they're not necessarily still able to make the distinction with reality and fiction. So you might like the zombie apocalypse, but it might just not be the right thing for your person living with dementia. So just be a wee bit considerate of what's on the television. They might prefer the radio, or if they like the television, we've said in previous sessions that the rainforest and the nature DVDs, David Attenborough, who's got a beautiful timbre to his voice, those ones would be really good to have on hand to pop into the video to just give it something different. Sometimes people have a problem with either leaving to go out through an emergency exit door or a door that you have to keep open. And I have seen this in certain care homes where they put a no entry sign or ladies' toilet to stop gentlemen going into another room that they're not meant to go into, or going to a door that has an emergency exit and can't be locked. So think a little bit outside the square with some of those things. You could have a stop sign. You could have, as I say, ladies' toilets or gents only, and a picture just to make them think twice. Or you could have the door wallpapered the same as the rest of the room, or painted to match so it blends in and you don't know that there's a door there. So be a little bit creative. It's really important too, and we've said this all along, to have the conversation with your family, your friends, your care workers about how things are going, A, for the person living with dementia, and B, for you as a carer. Because sometimes you have to take time off work, or you have to attend to an emergency because they've had a problem with the new care worker. Things like that. There's so many issues that you need a little bit of looking after too as a carer. And if you're open and honest with your care workers, one would hope that you would get the understanding and the care back. But if they don't know, they can't help. Now, I had a nickname in a previous time of work with people with dementia as the hug lady. So I have a big thing about giving people hugs. They're important, they're nurturing, they're saying without words, I care. But I always have to remember that not everybody wants a hug. So I always ask, can I give you a hug? Because some people have been abused, or they're just not their nature, or they're threatened by a hug. But on the whole, the majority of people like a hug. So from me to you, here's a hug.